Hey guys, this is Larry with the BulkLoads Podcast. I got John Calloway in with me today. We're going to get to know him and his background, but John's been a longtime friend of mine. Well, you could say that we have come up in the logistics space together. We work closely with each other. We bounce ideas off each other. John runs a brokerage, and we're going to get into that. And he's got some really, really good information regarding how he has developed his business, why motor carriers trust him, why he trusts his motor carriers, how they deliver on the expectation, and the communication piece that goes along with being a broker and working with motor carriers. So we're really excited about today. We're going to hop into it. Before we get into it, I had the privilege of going duck hunting with John and a couple other of our BulkLoads clients. We went down to Stewart Ranch in Oklahoma. That was 2 weeks ago, the week before Christmas.
Right before Christmas, yep.
And so we got to spoil him and shoot some ducks. That was my first time duck hunting.
That was mine too. Didn't know what to expect, man.
I don't know who shot more ducks.
I shot a lot.
I
didn't hit a lot.
I think I only hit one duck, maybe two. So
we celebrated that though.
We did celebrate.
That was big.
It was a good time, and it was fun to have Jared down there and have some networking with a couple of our other clients. One being from a large grain co-op, and then another client that is a merchandiser as well as a broker. So it's really fun, really great networking. But we'll hop into it. So I met John back in our C.H. Robinson days. My first job out of college was with C.H. Robinson. I was a sales executive for them here in Springfield, Missouri. I had probably been hired about 6 to 9 months before we started looking for another sales executive, and that's where I met John.
Yeah, that was a fun experience. That was a fun team.
A lot's changed since then.
Yeah, for a lot of people.
A lot's changed since then. Robinson's changed a lot. We always joke, some people love Robinson, some people don't like them. Robinson doesn't dabble in the bulk space as much. We do see, when we were at Robinson, we competed a lot with TQL. They're on our board. They kind of dabble in the bulk space a little bit. But love them or hate them, I had a great experience.
Same here, man. Wouldn't be where I'm at without them.
Yeah.
They're great at creating opportunities for future leaders.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
For other companies, that is.
Yeah. So
their training's phenomenal.
The training was really good, and I think what was so impactful and something that I'm sure that you use today, as I do in our business, is the access to just high-level data.
100%.
I mean, you could look at every spot market rate in just about every lane in the U.S. and have a pretty good idea of where you need to be on a load to make sure that it gets covered for your shipper, as well as make the motor carrier some money in the process.
Right. Get a win-win-win across the board.
Yeah.
That's always the goal.
So that was a lot of fun. That's where we met. How long we worked together? About a year?
It was
probably
longer than that,
year and a half.
right?
Year and a half.
'Cause we were there 2017. And then...
Yeah, in 2019, I took a job as an insurance salesman for another large company here in Springfield called Bancorp South Insurance, and that's where I started dedeveloping trucking insurance.
And it was only 2 years that we were together then.
Yeah, 2 years. I think
it felt longer than that.
It felt longer, but yeah, it was a quick 2 years, and we both moved on. But it's interesting to see, looking back on those times, it was really hard. I mean, I remember you and I sitting in the sales office, pounding out 30 to 100 calls every single day.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for that time now. And I wasn't grateful for it at the time. I was like, man, this is really freaking hard.
Yeah. The failure-based sport.
Yeah.
Type of mentality.
How many shippers get calls every day from freight brokers saying,
right,
hey, let me move your freight. Let me move your freight.
Right, I mean, if we're doing that 30 to 100 times a day, you bet there are other companies at a minimum. If we look at the larger companies in the game, every single sales rep there that's doing it is tasked with high-level activities.
Yep. And
then you go to that opportunity. I bet, and even in today's market, those people that we were reaching out to are getting 200 calls or emails.
Yeah. So you got to separate yourself. 100%. I mean, there's got to be something unique about you, or something unique about what you're saying or what you're offering. So fast forward a little bit, I worked in trucking insurance for 3 years. Helped them build a transportation unit up here in Springfield. That's how I met Jared. You also had met Jared prior to me coming here, I believe.
Yeah. Got connected through one of our colleagues that was at Robinson.
Yep.
And then Met with Jared at a bread co.
Yeah.
Bread. Sorry, the St. Louis is coming out. And
Yeah.
It's called Bread Co., not Panera
It's still
Bread.
Breadco for the hometown St. Louis people.
Right.
Yeah, so that was great. And during my time at Bancorp South, I met a local trucking company who was looking to start a freight brokerage. I knew John would be an awesome fit over there, and we got you connected over there. And that's where I'll kind of let you hop in and talk about kind of what you were. So 3 years ago is when you 4 years ago you started that.
Mid 2019 is when those conversations started.
Yeah.
And then I left Robinson at the end of 2019, started Logex in January of 2020.
Yeah. So that's kind of where the story picks up, but talk a little bit about, what is Logex, who you guys are, what you represent, what are your core competencies as a freight broker and the market, and how you've been able to grow that business, because you guys have seen significant growth over the last 4 years.
Absolutely. So you go to the end of 2019, ultimately having that conversation with my team, my ownership team, and said yes, right? So you look at who Logex is and how we've developed into who we are today. We realized very fast that, and I say we, but it was just me at the time. I was solo for the first 6 months.
Yeah.
Realized very fast that the brokerage 3PL space is extremely saturated.
Sure.
There are over 15,000 brokerages in North America.
And that was 4 years ago.
That was 4 years.
So it's got to even be more now, I would say.
Yeah, it was. But with the market cycle we're in right now,
slowing down,
people are exiting, which is natural. It's part of the cycle. But going back to Logex, we found out very fast that we had to separate ourselves. We had to become specialists in a niche that nobody was excelling in, or minimal providers were excelling in.
Sure.
So you fast forward through 6 months of me being alone, developing out our go-to-market strategies, the technology that we wanted to use, looking at, all right, what are our core competencies going to be?
Yep.
Over this whole 3.5-year timeline after those first 6 months, business growth has typically come from one of two areas. And one of the major areas that has come from is the temperature-controlled LTL and consolidation space.
Sure.
Where, coming from Robinson, I'll water a lot of this down today.
Yeah.
When we're at Robinson, you bring a temp-controlled LTL opportunity to the table, and you, at the time, got told, yeah, you might just want to hang that one and kick it out of the pipeline.
Sure.
Right.
It's not worth pursuing. We don't have the capacity. It's hard. The pricing is difficult. Mm-hmm. The temp controlled is difficult. The consolidation really didn't exist. I mean, it started to exist at the tail end of what we were doing at a good pace. But man, I think I probably worked on 2 temp controlled LTLs when I was at Robinson. And I learned pretty quick that it was going nowhere. I don't think I ever called on another one.
Right. Yeah. It's discouraging a little bit. But fast forward to Logex, we found a lot of success in developing solutions in that space. So what we've done in that area is partnered with strategic, competent carriers that have a level of expertise in the temperature controlled space. And we've developed relationships with shippers that are in that small to top end of medium space.
Sure.
Where, they might have a decent amount of pallets outbound a week, but not enough density to those locations.
Sure.
So what we do is take all of that volume, consolidate it into one, and allow them to all have access to an equal buying power.
Sure.
Versus them trying to take that to the market themselves. What that's turned into is us developing and creating solutions for really any retailer, going into any retailer in North America.
So even the big ones, you're talking Walmart,
Costco, Sam's, Safeway, Publix,
all the major,
completely agnostic. And the beautiful thing about our programs is that, and you'll hear me be repetitive with it, but it is truly retailer agnostic. So we're talking from the Schnucks of the world, where they're only in a few cities, to the Walmarts of the world and everywhere in between.
Sure.
We can service all of those areas. the value and I'd say the outcomes that has allowed us to really grow the business. I would say it rides on the technology adaptation and implementation that Logex has brought.
Sure.
But on the other side of that coin, it's the quality and consistency and transparency that our carriers
Yeah.
bring to the table as well. Because we're asset light, right? We don't have enough to scale this out.
What do you mean by asset light?
So a blend of brokerage partner or brokerage carrier partners. So standard operating carriers.
Motor carriers that you guys employ to move your freight.
Correct. Contracted out to them. And then our own assets that we lease out.
Sure. And what are the assets that you guys lease out?
Those are all dry vans.
Okay.
So they don't.
And that's just trailers?
Yep, just trailers, no trucks.
So when people say asset light, typically they're referring to that they I guess my understanding is most asset light are trailers. They're typically not owning any trucks. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's extremely accurate. And what you'll see typically, well, actually, not typically, always in the brokerage space, where, and this is the beauty, and it's kind of growing quite a bit. Unfortunately, Convoy shut down.
Yeah.
But Convoy was a good example of that. Freightvana is a good example of that, where historically brokerage companies naturally, because of the business model, didn't jump into that water, didn't take the risk of leasing or owning equipment.
Sure.
Right? It's not part of the model. When we went through COVID and the market completely flipped upside down and it felt like companies had zero control over access to capacity.
Right.
That's where a lot of those investments were made. And that's what we decided to do to better serve clients that had a need for that.
Right. Did that give you guys, we talk a lot in this podcast about growing your business. A lot of our audience is either a motor carrier, a mid-sized motor carrier, or a brokerage that's a mid-sized brokerage. And we talk a lot about how do we get to that next step, right? If you've got one truck, how do you get to 5 trucks? If you got 5 trucks, how do you get to 10 trucks? On the brokerage side, where did buying assets fit into that scale? I mean, at what point was it where you're like, okay, I know that if we go out and we buy these assets, we can immediately jump our revenue, 50 to 100%?
Yeah, I think that's all driven by the demand of customers naturally, right? It economically has to make sense.
Yep.
From purchasing or leasing the equipment and what that cost is to what is the return.
Sure.
And the beautiful part about a brokerage company is that your overhead is typically easily controllable.
It's your people, right? It's your salaries. I mean,
right. It's my people and my technology.
Yep.
And, then if you go into leasing equipment, that gets put on the P&L
sure
as well, right? But you can control that. And, I have a lot of sympathy for carriers in the world, because if even a one-man operation, or if you compare a one-man operation to a 20-man, and I say man, but unit operation, it's not like scaling your business up and volume of equipment changes the variables that go into tracking profitability for that truck.
Sure.
Right. And there are so many variables that go into owning a truck and a trailer.
Yeah.
That it's really hard to get an accurate picture of what profitability looks like.
Yeah, for sure. Times. How do you build trust? We talk a lot about, I think there's this conception out there, and I understand it being at Robinson. I think a lot of motor carriers are under the impression that most brokers and most big brokers are there only for themselves.
Yeah.
And that the majority of the time the broker is taking a large percentage of the load and not paying the motor carrier what it's worth.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about that trust relationship with your motor carriers. What do you look for in a motor carrier? And then talk about kind of like, if you could give us some general percentage of like, most of the time a broker is taking less than, 10% of the load value. Like, how do you determine that? How do your sales guys determine like, hey, we're playing, if this is spot market freight and we got some transactional loads out there, what is the give and take with the motor carrier and how do you guys determine that?
Sure. Well, I think this the initial question that you ask, it starts with leadership and outlining goals and incentives that aren't only reflected for that individual.
Sure.
So it's more outward with all your partners included in that, if that's a goal for your business, which it should be, versus inward where it's all about me. It's my commission. It's my account. It's my money.
Yeah.
Because when you start thinking that way, your work's going to reflect it.
Sure.
Right? You're going to start pinching your carriers. You're going to start, in order for me to get that extra $30 of my commission on that load, I'm going to have to start beating carriers down.
Yeah.
And I think that's the starting point. So when you incentivize your employees to hit goals that are, obviously we have to make money, but are also reflective of the quality of how we treat people.
Sure.
Of how we make sure, as much as that's in our control, to ensure a win for the shipper, ensure a win for the carrier, and ensure a win for Logex.
Yeah.
Like if we can do all three of those things, regardless of the size of that revenue, we did well. We did good work.
Sure.
Right.
How often is it a win-win-win? I mean, I guess, I think there's this negative perception that it's never a win-win-win and that it's always a win-win. And then that third win for the motor carrier doesn't show up a lot of times.
Yeah.
How would you respond to that? Do you think that happens, or?
I think the motor carriers that have a firm grip on who they are, what type of freight they want to haul, what their operating expenses are, helps us go to bat for them.
Yeah, that's really good.
Because not only should brokerages be an advocate for their shipper customer, they should also be an advocate on the flip side of the coin for their carriers.
Sure.
And we have to treat them like our customers.
Yeah.
Not just, hey.
Not a commodity.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. And it's tough. I will say that, admittedly, in today's market where there's an excess of capacity.
Sure.
Everybody's a little bit more on edge because the market's down and you could, now the control is on the shipper.
Yeah.
Right. But my big thing that I would say to the carriers out there that may have a negative perception of brokerage companies, and I'm not justifying the bad.
Yeah, there's bad.
There's
right?
bad.
There's always going to be some bad actors.
Correct. There'll definitely be some bad actors out there. But what I will say is that the more that you're willing to be transparent, communicate well, adopt technology with your brokerage partners, be clear on what your goals are, we're going to flip that around and sell it back to our shippers. Right. So trust that your core partners are actually advocating for you.
Man, that's so good. And I think it's just such a reflection of how you build business. And that's something, because it is, I think what we've learned with the brokerage is just that even whether it's an insurance brokerage or whether it's a freight brokerage, anytime you're brokering a product, you're only as good as, first of all, your partners.
100%.
And second of all, your communication and trust to your clients.
Right.
And that's the thing is I love hearing you say that, because I always felt that when we were selling deals at C.H. Robinson that people were thinking that we were really
just out to get them.
Yeah, right. That's a great way to put it. Yeah. Just like really sticking it to them. And there are, like we said, some brokers that tend to do that more than others. Mm-hmm. But I don't think the majority of brokers are. And one thing that I love about our space on Bulk Loads is that, we work in the ag sector.
Yeah.
It is... The majority of people are hardworking, trustworthy, dependable.
They don't expect anything just to be given to them.
Right. But they recognize that everyone's got to make some money. I think where the distrust comes in is when you get a few bad brokers that ruin it for everybody, right? They have terrible communication.
Always
They try to screw the carrier every chance they get. They want to nickel and dime them. When the market's really good, they go and make a lot more money. And then when the market's bad, they beat down their carriers. Yeah. And it's this never ending cycle. So what would you say, as we have a lot of brokers that are on our board. Mm-hmm. How would you encourage the brokers to interact with the motor carriers? And if there's been distrust from the leadership level down to the sales executive selling the freight, how do they revamp their sales structure to make sure that it is a win-win-win?
Well, my first recommendation would be to view your carriers as an extension of you. I think that adds a layer of accountability for you as a brokerage company because, again, at the end of the day, your business does not exist or move or grow if you don't have carrier partners.
Yeah.
Period. Now, looking at, the second part of your question, it all depends on what you're trying to achieve as a business. And whatever those goals are that you've outlined, maybe you need to change them.
Yeah.
Because I would rank them out from top to bottom in strength of priority and say, all right, it is vital that as our mission as business leaders, as employees, that we do X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
If we can't do X, Y, and Z because that fourth thing on the list pulls us away from that, maybe that fourth thing has to go.
Right.
Right. And I think that's where it comes down and say, all right, we got to look ourselves in the mirror. What's our mission here? What are our goals here?
Yeah.
And then overlap that with your execution strategy. And I know that's a vague thing. And, I'll think of an example for Logex.
Yeah.
Where we want a win-win-win to exist. And don't get me wrong, like, are there opportunities and customers that all they care about is moving the freight?
Yeah.
But on the backside, we're being upfront with the carrier about that.
Yeah.
In the sense of, hey, here's this customer, here's their profile. These are the problems that we faced historically. We want to be clear about that with you, so you know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
But it's what I love about the brokerage space is that if you have a high performing, strong brokerage partner as if I'm a shipper or if I'm a carrier, they'll trust that brokerage company is an extension of both sides.
Yeah.
And that brings everybody together.
Sure.
Right there. Even though that carrier may never talk to the shipper,
right,
they're still going to get a sense of ownership over the outcome.
Yeah.
And that's what's the most important thing for us.
Yeah.
Is bringing visibility from, hey, here are the decisions that the shipper is wanting to do. Here's what we're doing in response to that. We want to make sure you get the full picture to bring you in and have an equal layer of investment, just like Logex does with that shipper. Because at the end of the day, that's going to better serve the shipper.
Yep.
Right. And likely, if you're performing well, your performance scores are great, your safety scores are compliant, your claims ratio is low.
Yeah.
Your costs are aligned with the market while still allowing you to be profitable.
Yep.
We're going to get more business.
Right.
Like that happens.
Yeah. That's a reflection of you.
Right. And we can all do that together.
Yeah.
Right?
That's good. That's really good. How, talk a little bit about, I'm assuming you guys use throughout the year, you may use a couple hundred different motor carriers. Mm-hmm. Give some insight into if you have a motor carrier that's never hauled a load for you before, and say you guys, post a load on a board or through some other avenue, that motor carrier ends up reaching out to you and wants to haul that load. Mm-hmm. What's your vetting process? And then how do you determine, what are the metrics that you determine if you're going to reuse that motor carrier again or not?
Sure. So we use two platforms primarily, one that measures or audits insurance records, safety scores, things like that.
Yeah.
And then one that gives a reflection of loads and lanes that they've moved in.
Sure.
Overlap that with where are they registered from? How many pieces of equipment do they have?
Yeah.
So you get a lot of those discovery questions answered within 10 seconds.
So this guy calls you, hey, I want to book this load. You take their DOT number, you pop it into that database, and it runs a quick report.
Yep. And then then that's where that formal discovery will happen with that dispatcher or whomever's calling in on that load. So, all right, here's what I'm seeing, man. Does this align with what you're telling me?
Yeah.
And that's what our account managers are doing on a daily basis.
Sure.
As they're onboarding carriers.
Sure.
Where you at? Where you from? What type of loads do you move? Look at their safety scores. Look at their compliance scores.
Have you ever turned a motor carrier away because of the safety scores?
Absolutely. Yeah. There are three tiers that we look at, right? And it's satisfactory. Oh,
on the DOT rating, a satisfactory rating.
right. Which, you're in the green.
Yeah.
You're good.
You're good.
And then there are some that, you get the yellow light and it's,
Yeah.
they're not too bad, but not too good.
Sure.
And then you got the red lights.
Yeah.
And those are the unacceptable ones.
Yeah.
So the tough part about that is that there are some situations where, hey, they might be a red light. We're more inclined to use that carrier if they can tell us, hey, what's
going on?
What's going on?
Yeah.
And if they can't answer that, we're not using them.
Yeah.
But if they say, hey, here's what happened in that scenario, and when you're, a 2 to 5 man operation, if one truck goes down because of something, that impacts that whole score drastically.
Yeah.
But those are the things that we're looking at. So in terms of rebooking, I would say that if you're communicating well, you're transparent about where you're at, what you're willing to do and partner with us on, and then go do it. Those are huge things. What we look at is the stickiness on technology.
Sure.
Okay, are you going to consistently be tracking?
So they got to turn it on that they're able to be tracked, correct?
Yep. Yeah. So we'll send them a link. They opt in. And
how often do they say, no, I don't want to be tracked?
Does
that happen or not?
It does happen. I would say that that's a little bit more common with the bad players out there.
Sure.
Or the owner operator that's been in the business that doesn't want Big Brother tracking them.
Sure.
And to those guys' credit, they built their own business and have been in that rig for 30 plus years.
And maybe they've never needed it and they don't see
and they perform flawlessly.
Yeah.
But that comes with us developing rapport, them running multiple loads, and then us saying, all right.
So you may not require it after a certain period of time.
Yes. But I'll go back to this. If our customer has requested it as part of our agreement, we need to hit a certain level of compliance.
Sure.
And as we build out that carrier requirement for onboarding, that can change between customers, shippers. So we reflect whatever those requests are and agreements are with our customer and say, all right, that means we have to choose the type of carriers that we use. And sometimes, let's say we have this many carriers in our portfolio.
Yeah.
Based on those requirements, we might only actually have access to this many.
Yeah.
And then we need to funnel it through and say, all right, this is where we can start overlapping actual opportunities with you, XYZ carrier.
Yeah. That's interesting you bring that up because we see a lot of the, we run cab reports for all our motor carriers that we do the insurance, and we look at their safety scores and we try to build out a game plan for them to improve their safety scores. 5 to 10 years ago, those safety scores were really strictly looked at from an underwriting perspective, right? To determine how much premium the insurance company needs in order to make a profit on that carrier.
Right.
Now we're seeing more and more shippers actually starting to require better safety data, which is interesting because I think there's this link and there's this misconception that from the brokerage side, I think there's a misconception that, hey, this motor carrier has a liability policy here, we're good. That conversation's really been blown up over the last couple of years. That's not the case anymore. And the shipper and the broker are the ones pushing that onto the motor carrier. Maybe not an underwriter anymore. Of course, they're going to look at it, but it's really coming like, hey, you want more freight? You want better rates? Here's our requirements.
Well, in that alone, let's talk. We don't need to talk about it, but let's look at inflation.
Yeah.
Cost of goods up drastically.
Yeah.
So if we say the standard of goods of a full truckload 25 years ago, and we move that straight across today with the exact same goods, it costs more to make those. It costs more to buy the ingredients and procure the ingredients to create that product. It's likely that the value of those goods is much higher.
Yeah.
So that alone is a reflection of, hey, we have 100,000 because it's been the standard for, it's a tale as old as time.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
But in reality, we need 175 now.
Right.
Right. And that is all coming from the shipper, funneling that down to the broker.
Yep.
And then saying, carrier, this is where we got to get this going. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to see the evolution of it, and I think that's what's really interesting now is there's all this pressure on the motor carrier coming from different angles. It's coming from your insurance provider. It's coming from litigation and nuclear verdicts. So just socially, there's this social pressure. It's also coming from shippers and maybe some brokers.
I would say that's very reasonable. I wouldn't say some brokers. There's likely that's a lot of them.
Yeah, probably most of them at this point.
Right.
And so as an insurance agent, it's always funny because we're always assessing like, maybe if we can create a game plan and a structure to get this person from a negative CAB report to a good CAB report, yes, their insurance premium theoretically should go down. But what we don't talk a lot about, and I think it's something that we need to hit more on, is it creates trust with your client who is the shipper or the broker. And so there's actually a whole flow of positive effect from putting an emphasis on a safety culture and getting your cab cleaned up. And it can not only save you money on your insurance, it can also create you more money.
You can generate more sales through that, right? That is 100% a sales tactic.
Yep.
And key detail.
Yeah.
That brokers and shippers want to hear.
Yep.
Wholeheartedly. And I would ask you the question, you asked me, hey, what's attractive for, Logex to find a motor carrier? What is that profile?
Yeah.
On the flip side of that coin for insurance, like how does that overlap with what I said?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a few things that we always look for. Now on insurance, it's a little bit different, right? If you have bad safety scores, we can still insure you. We can still find ways to help you improve your culture, but it's probably not going to turn into premium savings right away.
No, but over time.
But over time, if you let us develop a game plan, it takes 2 or 3 years to get these. I tell all my clients all the time, one bad inspection can last 2 years.
Yeah.
One good one does nothing.
1 minute.
You need 100 good ones to your one bad one for your safety to get cleaned up. And so that's just like a really important metric that you have to start paying attention to.
I'm going to get pretty raw with this next question. Yeah. How much do you think the transportation world is just stacked up against carriers?
I think it's
in terms of like true liability, gun to the head, under the microscope, like, and I say that from my experience of like brokers aren't always in question.
Yeah.
And we fight against that.
Yep.
And when the opportunity is right for us to do that for our carrier partners.
Yep.
But it's definitely a lot of the heat goes right to the carrier.
Yeah. And I think, I will say, I do think brokers have gotten more into the limelight recently. But I think that's new.
It is.
I don't think that's been happening. When we were at Robinson, we never heard about a scenario where a broker got pulled into a lawsuit. Never.
You and I, and we're not going to talk about it here, but you and I were in the middle of a horrible accident.
Horrible accident.
And we handed it over within 2 minutes. Never heard about it again.
Never heard about it again. And I guarantee nothing happened with it. I do think someone's
for Robinson.
For us.
Yeah.
Someone's insurance paid out on that deal.
100%.
It wasn't ours.
Yes.
It wasn't. It could have been the motor carrier. We don't know. But it is interesting. I do think motor carriers are the easiest to attack because there's so much data available to the marketplace against them.
Sure.
And the plaintiffs have gotten really, really good. Plaintiff attorneys have gotten really good at manipulating juries. I mean, we talk about the reptile theory and what they're able to do and how they're able to use our brains against us in the court of law.
It's more psychological warfare in those rooms.
It really is.
Than informational.
And I think that because the motor carrier is the easiest target with the deepest pockets, it makes a lot of sense for them to attack them.
Yeah. Have you been keeping up to speed? Because I know a majority of your portfolio on the insurance side is motor carriers.
Absolutely.
But I know you write some contingency coverages for brokerage companies.
Yes, absolutely.
What avenues are you looking at or key points that you've seen recently? Because again, like I'm doing the same thing on my side, and obviously you and I are colleagues, and we talk about everything. What's going on out there, man? What are you seeing in the brokerage space that some people who may not be as aligned or aware of what's going on in the market right now for brokerage companies? What are you seeing out there that like, hey, you might need to check this out? Like, look at your bond, look at your contingency coverage, look at your limits, all those things. What are you seeing?
Most brokers, it's relatively easy to get a brokerage set up.
Right.
You get a surety bond, you post the bond, you're pretty much ready to roll.
Right.
A lot of brokers don't know to even ask for contingency coverages up front. So we actually run into new brokers that will reach out to us that say, hey, we want to start posting on the board. We're a new brokerage. What do I need to do? 9 times out of 10, they don't even know that they should have insurance coverage. And so that always creates another financial obligation. Because like right now, I can tell you for a new brokerage starting out, so you think you're going to do $500,000 to $1 million of gross revenue. You're going to pay $12,000 for insurance. Now, the shippers really help us out on the insurance side because they're not allowing most brokers. They're not going to give them any loads unless they're carrying the contingency coverages so that the shipper then negates some liability coverage.
Right.
Brokers, I can't strongly suggest enough that you need to make sure that your contingency coverages are going to cover you in the event that the motor carrier's insurance policy doesn't respond.
And they're negligent. Yeah.
We're seeing more and more brokers get tied into lawsuits in the last 2 years. I think that's a natural with the big nuclear verdicts and the plaintiffs being really smart, plaintiff attorneys getting after it.
Finding deeper pockets to go after.
You only got $1 million for the motor carrier, but hey, we might have another $1 million from the broker if we can prove that broker was negligently hiring that motor carrier. Right. That broker should have looked at their safety scores, and we have data that suggests that they never did a background check.
Right.
They just hired this guy who maybe had a DUI. Maybe the motor carrier hired someone with a bad driving record.
Drug record, you name it.
And so now we're seeing more litigation where that broker's actually getting named in the lawsuit. Now, whether that policy responds or not, there's a lot of stuff that has to happen.
Right.
But they are getting pulled into it. And so your insurance, whether it pays out or not, that's only half the battle. The other battle that people forget is the duty to defend. You're going to have court costs that accrue.
Yeah.
Your insurance carrier is required legally in the legal obligation to defend you in the court of law.
Right.
So you may rack up $100,000 in court bills in one day. Your policy is going to respond to that.
100%.
And so that broker needs to make sure that they're covered. First of all, that they have coverage.
That's step one.
Second of all, that it's accurate. You want contingent auto liability and contingent cargo, right? So,
and I would add another layer to that. Not only should you have the coverage and then understand the type of coverage that you need to have platforms and systems in place that audit directly against the carriers that you're onboarding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if you don't, you will be held liable.
Yeah, and we see it a lot too now when we're working on insurance renewals and we see the underwriters have started requesting the actual broker carrier agreement. And so
I gave you mine.
Absolutely.
They see it.
You got to have it. And they're actually having attorneys review broker carrier agreements and saying, hey, this broker is actually not protecting themselves enough. And we're going to redline it and we're going to send it back. And if they don't make that change in the broker carrier agreement, we're not going to provide coverage.
Right.
So it's actually a benefit to the broker.
It is.
It's a huge benefit because you have a professional attorney that sees cases all the time against brokers actually saying, hey, man, we need to adjust this. Also, you may be leaving yourself a little bit liable by throwing this in your carrier agreement. Let's just take it out.
For sure. And that's, a good point where it's like small, maybe even mid-sized brokerage companies, they don't have a general counsel on their staff.
Right.
Right. They may not even have relationships with any competent attorneys that have experience in transportation litigation cases.
Yeah.
Right. Go find one. It can be expensive, but it's worth it.
They're out there.
They are out there. And depending on how much you actually care about your business, will probably drive you towards or away from that. But for Logex, that is 100% a need and a requirement for us as a business operator.
Have you ever had any motor carriers not sign your broker carrier agreement?
No.
So they've all signed.
Because I don't think that they're reading all of it.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about. Do you think they are reading it?
No, because it comes back in about 30 seconds after it's signed.
And that's the other thing I would say, like the motor carrier, make sure that you're not negligent in hiring on with a broker with a poor broker carrier agreement that pushes all the liability back on you. Like there are some safe metrics to put in place. And man, I remember when we were at Robinson, we had to send everything to legal, right? Not everyone has that luxury to send it to a legal team. Most small carriers don't. And so they're entering into contracts a broker carrier agreement to get that load, right?
Yeah.
You got to get home.
Or directly with a shipper, but they don't know what those contracts say.
Yep.
And there is a lot of legal jargon in there that, quite frankly, is over the head of like 99% of the people in the industry.
Yeah.
I'd say in response to, the contracts, carriers, make sure you're looking at credit days to pay record.
Oh, that's
on
good.
DAT.
Yeah, it's gotten a lot. It's gotten further
look
out.
how long the brokerage company has been in business. All those records are accessible for you. Just like when we pick up the phone and vet you, pick up the phone and vet your broker.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you don't want to get into bed with the sleazy ones.
Yeah.
They won't advocate for you.
No. And a lot of them don't know what they're doing in the first place. If it's a new guy that hasn't been doing it a long time, you want to just, and that's not always the case. Sometimes it goes well and there's no hiccups.
And they're small and they're great people, but there are some gaps that, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And they needed to figure that out with a trial by error.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's one of the beautiful things I think about what we're trying to do with bulk loads and bulk insurance and smart freight and bulk TMS is we're trying to give owner operators, brokers, shippers resources.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what you are too, is we provide resources for shippers and motor carriers. But you gotta utilize them.
And brokers.
And brokers.
You guys provide solutions for brokers.
Absolutely. Everybody. And the goal for us is to just give them resources. And so like, if you're a broker, man, give me a call. Let's look at your broker carrier agreement.
Yeah.
I look at them all the time. It takes me 5 minutes to review it.
Absolutely. And here's a cool part is you came from the oldest and largest 3PL in North America.
Yep.
You gained a lot there.
Yeah. It was awesome.
You and I talk about this all the time, but you and I collectively, obviously in separate industries now, would not be where we're at today without Robinson.
Yeah. And it really went back to Robinson's core mission is the people, processes, and technology.
Right.
I still remember that to this day. And it's something we incorporate at Bulk Loads, and I'm sure you incorporate.
Absolutely.
But the process for KPI measurement, key performance indicators for measuring your motor carriers, that can be the difference between winning a big contract or losing a big contract. I mean, we'll kind of end with this, but talk a little bit about how you scorecard like your best carriers, the metrics you put in place with them, why you put in those metrics. And if they don't deliver on them, what's kind of the repercussions?
Yeah. We don't live and die by a 3-strike rule. That's pretty old school and I'd say archaic.
Yeah.
But there's still some truth that's held with that. Excuse me. But when we look at, and again, success is defined differently depending on the shipper, right?
Yep.
Now, we hold ourselves to a really high standard. So regardless if the shipper does or not, we're going to ensure that the carrier gets a guideline from Logex that says, this is the expectation. I don't care if the shipper said 85%. We're at 98.
Yep.
That's our 98.7 company average for performance scores.
You guys are 98.7?
Correct.
That's got to be top in the industry, I would think.
Yeah, it's very high. And I don't care what the shipper says. You're going to commit to that. And if you can't, then we're not going to partner with you. But talking about what are the qualities of our top performing carriers, I would say that their communication is best in class. They are willing to collaborate and be flexible.
Ooh, that's good. Yeah.
They got to be flexible because logistics is
it's logistics.
It's logistics, right? Got to be flexible if you want to win. And then there's 2 more. I would say number 3 is the compatibility of relationships.
Yeah.
And hey, do our account managers work well with your account managers?
Sure.
Are you guys willing to sit down and hear feedback and also provide feedback to us on how we can be better?
Yeah.
Right. It's always a 2-way street.
Does that mostly come back to communication?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the 4th piece I would say is the adoption and implementation of technology.
Yeah.
Which you could root that back to solid change management.
Sure.
Because that's where I'd say on both sides of the coin, shipper and carrier, is where the magic happens for these types of relationships.
Yep.
And, 2023 was a weird year. A obviously in the transportation market, it was down.
Yeah.
But I think where companies are succeeding still and continuing to grow are the ones that are excellent in change management,
Yep.
figured out how to 10x their business
Yep.
with systems, processes, and technology,
Sure.
and implemented that and are able, that's enabling them to scale their business out without having to throw money and people
Sure.
at the problems that they're facing.
Yeah, that's good.
I think about one of my guys, he's a director of account management, and his main focus, or I mean, really one, it's his job.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's 4 years he's been here. But really it's come to light through this COVID world.
Sure.
Where he's looking at every detail of our business and saying, all right, this used to take us 80 touches. I'm going to make it 8.
Yeah.
That frees up a lot of time.
A lot of time.
And in turn, we can add 10x of the business and grow that much without having to throw thousands and thousands of dollars at it.
Yeah.
But one thing, and I know we're going to wrap up here soon, one thing that, you know, I've come to realize, and I'm blessed and thankful for the position that I'm in and the position Logex is in to be a key role within North America's supply chain with our customers. But when you look at, you know, the 15,000 plus brokerage companies in North America, only about 5% of them really break that 10 million gross mark. And everybody else is, you know, they're in the basement. They got their one man show type deal, but that's to each their own, and that's good. That's okay.
Yeah. If you can make a living that way and
100%
enjoy what you do, that's awesome.
But after a few conversations with some of them, I realized, and some of them are really good.
Yeah.
Right. And some of them have really good relationships, but horrible processes.
Sure.
Is you need to look at the whole order life cycle from quote to invoice, map out how you engage within each layer of that. And if you can't answer it, or you feel like they're barriers for your business to scale out, address it. Talk to somebody that, I feel like I'm in like an Alcoholics Anonymous class. It's like, address it, acknowledge it. Talk to somebody in your network. Surely you know one that can help you build that blueprint out with new business goals, new systems, new technology. Because a lot of these guys, it's like, I would pay a lot of money to have the relationships you have.
Yeah. They got it figured out on the relationship
Tweak this lever, right? And then you'll be able to take on all that business that you didn't think you could.
Right.
Without having to add people.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a win-win.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. It's so interesting. The logistics world is so vast and so big, and there's so many great individuals and great companies. And I think that's what's really fun about our relationship and growing together as friends and as former colleagues and as partners. But it's really cool to see that logistics is this giant space, but it's so niche. Mm-hmm. And the people, the really good people with really good reputations, it seems like, are very frequent in the industry. Yeah. And it's really good to connect with people. And so, man, we'll wrap up, but man, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This has been such a fun conversation. So many takeaways. We hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope that this was an encouragement to brokers and to people starting a brokerage company, because man, you've been a huge success. You couldn't have done it without taking a risk. You took the risk.
You go from 22 billion plus company to net zero.
Net zero day one.
But hey, we're here, baby. Yeah, it was fun. It's been fun, and it will continue to be fun.
Well, congratulations on the success and the growth. And man, you guys are still day one, man. You guys are getting a new building you're moving into in February. Yeah. You know, you're here in Springfield, Missouri, Stratford, Missouri. You're right in the middle of the country. So man, I'm looking forward to seeing your guys' growth. You know, you've tooled around on BulkLoads a little bit. Yeah. I think that you've looked on there and played with it. You know, Jared's a good friend of both of ours. So man, it's been awesome having you in here. Is there any final words or any encouragement you'd like to give to the viewers?
You know, thanks for letting me join the show today.
Yeah.
I'm about to call it a podcast. Larry and I used to go through a lot of acronyms on the CH floor. But, you know, encouragement to the carriers, brokers, and shippers out there is be transparent, be collaborative. You know, when you find the right people, you can make really good opportunities for everybody involved. So that would be my encouragement. Yeah. And last sign off sentence for everybody.
That's really good. Yeah. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe. If you have any questions for me or John, reach out to Tyler and Joe or myself off Bulk Loads, and we will get you connected with John if you'd like to talk to him further and pick his brain. He's been a great resource for a lot of brokers and carriers that we've pushed to him. So again, thank you guys. John Calloway, CEO of Logex, freight brokerage, man, doing big things. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. See you guys.
Man.